to another edition of TV Treasures. Yes, it's once again time to take a look at a short-lived TV series that wasn't really that bad. And since I've now spent 3 episodes and a special bashing Hanna-Barbera for their bad stuff, I feel the need to talk about one of their lesser-known shows that was really pretty good to me. This is Wildfire. If you're like me, you still remember when each of the major networks had its own Saturday morning lineup of unique cartoon shows rather than just news shows or their own parent company's recycled shows. Hanna-Barbera was one of the biggest providers of this content, though not everything was as long-lasting as the Smurfs. Wildfire aired on CBS for the 1986-87 season and was at least another show that made up for a lack of a true pilot by explaining the backstory in a pretty decent opening song. Okay, it's a little cryptic, but basically it's about the mystical land of Darshan, where the good Queen Sarana is dying, and her last act is to command her magic talking horse Wildfire to send her infant daughter to another land. So he takes her to our world, the mortal world, and leaves her on this man's doorstep. Yeah, somehow I guess a lot of kids wish they came from a fantasy world and were just left on their real parents' doors. Fast forward 13 years and we see Sarah Cavanaugh living with her adopted father on a Montana ranch. Sarah, however, knows she is the princess of Darshan, and every so often is called by Wildfire through a magic amulet to take her back to her true home. It seems Darshan has been in peril since Sarana's passing, as there is no true ruler and a sorceress named Diabolin is trying to take command. Sounds like half the nations in Africa and the Middle East. Most of the episodes did have a similar format, as was the norm. Sarah and her friend are engaged in some activity when Wildfire calls Sarah and transports her through the portal to Darshan, where we learn Diabolin's latest plan to convince the people to make her queen. Because people naturally trust someone who looks like they want to be Maleficent from Sleeping Beauty. Sarah is aided by Doran and his pony Brutus, along with this old sage who I think was named Alvinar and looked like he could be Dalbin from the Prydain Chronicles if he was a furry. The animation is basic Hanna-Barbera low quality, even if I wasn't showing you these old VHS quality clips. But again, you can overcome poor visual quality with a good enough story. Prime example, Rocky and Bullwinkle's animation is terrible, but the characters and the story arcs that were written made it a classic show. The characters in this show were also good in that they had limits that made them more human. Diabolin is not an all-powerful sorceress. She has to rely on these specters of darkness to give her her power. Sarah, meanwhile, is far from a Mary Sue heroine. She mostly solves problems with her own smarts or caring personality, but she's still a young girl and occasionally must be saved by Wildfire. There was some balance between the protagonists. It did look like there was some attempt to shoehorn lessons in a handful of episodes, but it never actually seemed forced. Looking back, I'm actually impressed at the one that basically debunks the Peter Pan mythos as Sarah convinces a group of eternally young kids that it's okay to break their spell and grow up. Now, good luck finding decent paying jobs and homes that won't drive you into bankruptcy! What really made Wildfire unique at the time was that it could have been yet another show where the real backstory is never really explained, but it wasn't. A number of those questions were answered in the 5th episode, A Meeting in Time, where Sarah gets mistakenly sent back to the past to the day of Queen Serana's wedding. It's here that everything started, as we learn that Diabolin is actually Serana's stepsister, who felt Serana was too weak to rule. So this is where she frees the Spectres, who tell her the way to stop Serana from becoming queen is to keep her from marrying Prince Cavan.
If you want to stop Serana's wedding, your guards must stop Prince Cavan from reaching the castle.
I will usurp my sister's right to the throne by ensuring she doesn't get married! Wait, what are the laws of this land again? Sarah finds out all of this and manages to stop Diabolin's plan and save her future father without ever actually seeing him. So I know the H.G. Wells theory about if you kill your father in the past, but what happens if you save your father? Ow, time travel hurts on my brain.
By betraying me, you betray all Darshan. You leave me no choice but to banish you from Castle Therinia forever.
The wedding is on, but Diabolin casts a very specific curse, being kind enough to give Serana 1 year of marital bliss before she, Cavan, and their future child will all perish. So this now explains why Serana sent Sarah away as her last wish, as Sarah would be protected from the curse in the mortal world. It's hinted in some episodes that even now she can't stay forever in Darshan or she'll fall victim to the curse, but this supposed time limit is never taken to further detail. Oh, and it's also suggested at the end of this episode that Prince Cavan and Sarah's adopted father are one and the same? That brings us to the 12th episode, Where the Dreams Come From. In this one, the Spectres go rogue, find a way to cross over into the mortal world, and capture Sarah. This leads Wildfire to return and reveal that Mr. Kavanaugh is in fact Prince Cavan.
You're in the mortal world. I brought you here years ago to escape Diabolin's curse.
Now, I know this may look like a cop-out to tie everything so neatly together, but it actually makes sense. Wildfire sent Cavan to the mortal world first, likely while Serana was still with child. Sarah is born, and Serana falls victim to the curse, commanding Wildfire to take the baby away to save her. Wildfire knew exactly where to take her, believing that the paternal instincts of Cavan would subconsciously be there, even as Kavanaugh had no knowledge of his past. It also gave more background to the Spectres, as it's revealed Cavan was the one who trapped them in the beginning. It's likely they never cared about Diabolin's plans at all. They were simply using her to find and get revenge on Cavan, while she was trying to use them to become queen.
The amulet is the one power in all Darshan that can defeat you.
This whole episode would have been a good way to end the series, even as Sarah and Cavan must still return to the mortal world with Cavan's memory being erased again. Except it wasn't the end, as there was one more episode about Wildfire possibly becoming the king of the horses in Darshan. This likely meant Hanna-Barbera was hoping for a second season, as there were still parts of Sarah's past we hadn't learned yet, like how she first met Wildfire and learned of her heritage. Sadly, the show was not renewed, so those questions were left unanswered. And years later, this show still resonates with me as one that may have been ahead of its time and was a lot better than its 13-episode run would indicate. It may not have had an actual continuous story arc, but the bits and pieces it did have were pretty deep and may have helped set the tone for future cartoons. Sadly, this show is buried within Time Warner's video vault and may never see the light of day again. About 15 years ago, a small block of episodes aired on Cartoon Network, but that's about it. So unless you check for online uploads, this is definitely a buried treasure. But how could Boomerang possibly find the time for this show when they're busy showing us all of those great Scooby-Doo cop-outs like Fang Face? See you next time on TV Trash.